In the silent darkness surrounding Singapore's upscale residential estates in the early 1970s, a strange new form of crime began to emerge, one that challenged the security standards and criminal psychology of the time. From January 1973 to June 1975, a group of 4 men carried out a string of more than 500 break-ins, thefts, and armed robberies. They took nearly 500,000 Singapore dollars in cash and valuables, equivalent to about 220,000 US. $5 at the exchange rate of the time, a record-breaking figure in local criminal history. But their most shocking and unmistakable feature was what they wore during the crimes. Nothing but tight, short swimming trunks. This tactic did more than help them squeeze through narrow openings. It turned them into slippery figures, almost impossible to grab, both literally and figuratively. The period from 1971 to 1980 has been described by economists as Singapore's decade of turbulence. The core vulnerability, 5, of an import-dependent nation became clear when the global oil crisis broke out in 1973. Crude oil prices quadrupled after the OPEC embargo, triggering severe cost-push inflation. In Singapore, inflation reached a record 30% in the first half of 1974. For working-class families and the unemployed, the ability to afford basic necessities declined sharply. Data from the Monetary Authority of Singapore shows that financial pressure at the time was extremely harsh. The growing divide between wealthy bungalow districts and poorer working-class areas created a distorted psychological motive for crimes targeting the property of the upper class. The 1970s also marked a complete transformation of Singapore's urban landscape through the public housing program of the Housing and Development Board. The share of residents living in HDB flats surged from 9% in 1960 to 67% by 1980. This process was not simply about relocation. It also disrupted the structure of the kampong spirit, the traditional sense of community and neighborly trust. People who had once lived in villages, accustomed to open spaces and mutual trust, were pushed into modern high-rise blocks that felt unfamiliar and distant. During this transition, old security systems became outdated, while new security standards had not yet fully taken root. The bungalows, semi-detached houses, and terrace houses, the main targets of the swimming trunk gang, still retained older architectural features, including louvered windows that could be easily removed from the outside with simple tools. Alongside economic development, Singapore was also facing the rise of drug abuse, especially heroin. By the late 1970s, an estimated 15,000 to 20,000 people were addicted to heroin. Although members of the swimming trunk gang were not reported to have any direct connection to drugs, the existence of an illegal black market for stolen goods at construction sites, where many illegal immigrants worked, provided a perfect logistical network for their operations. Secret societies dating back to the 19th century had also left remnants in the criminal culture. And Wagaman Abdullah, one of the members of the swimming trunk gang, was a living example of that legacy, with a past as a fighter in secret societies. The swimming trunk gang was not a group of impulsive young men. It was made up of middle-aged men with life experience, specialized skills, and a strange shared belief in supernatural protection. Wasan Sakiban, 45, was the central figure, the man who planned the details of each attack. His job as a driver for a medical professor allowed him to observe the lives of wealthy families without drawing suspicion. Most notably, Wasan claimed to possess spiritual powers that could protect the gang from being detected by the police. In Singapore's social context at the time, belief in charms or supernatural protection acted as a kind of psychological glue, helping the members stay calm and reckless during operations that could last for hours, even while victims were sleeping nearby. Wagaman Abdullah brought the experience of someone who had spent time in secret societies. His presence helped maintain discipline within the group and gave them the ability to intimidate victims with violence when necessary. As the oldest member, Wagaman served as a field advisor, someone who understood the streets, the surroundings, and how to react when things suddenly changed. Suhaimi Harith, 40, was a driver and the nephew of Wagaman Abdullah. Finally, there was Khalil Muhammad Dole, 39, a worker at an engineering company in Bedak. Because of his small build, Khalil became the group's secret weapon in their break-in method. His job was to slip through small openings after the louvered window panels had been removed, then open the door from the inside for the other members. Khalil's physical flexibility, combined with the gang's minimal clothing, turned him into an intruder who was almost impossible to stop with ordinary physical barriers. The swimming trunk gang developed an extremely consistent and effective operating method, making full use of surprise and physical advantage. Each job usually began sometime between 2 a.m. and 4:30 a.m. The period when people are in their deepest sleep. The group would meet up, dressed like ordinary men, and take a taxi to the target location. Using taxis was a calculated move. It meant they did not leave a personal vehicle near the scene, and they could blend into the sparse late-night traffic. After getting out at a discreet location, usually near a park, a cemetery, or an open plot of land, they would remove all of their outer clothing, leaving on only their swimming trunks. Their clothes and personal items were carefully hidden at a collection point, where they would return after completing the robbery. Wearing only swimming trunks gave them three major tactical advantages. The first was complete mobility. With no clothing getting in the way, they could squeeze through narrow openings or climb across difficult surfaces more easily. If they were discovered and chased by victims or police, the lack of clothing made it harder for anyone to grab, pull, or hold them. In a struggle, the slipperiness of bare skin became a natural defensive advantage. Beyond that, the sight of masked, nearly naked figures holding knives inside a bedroom created extreme fear, paralyzing the victim's ability to resist. The group used simple but carefully chosen hand tools: screwdrivers, spanners, pliers, wire cutters, and small flashlights. Their typical method was to use a screwdriver to remove glass louvered window panels. Once they had created an opening large enough, Khalil would squeeze through and open the back door for Wasan, Wagaman, and Suhaimi. Once inside, they operated with remarkable calm. They did not hesitate to wake victims with a knife held to the throat, demanding to know where money and jewelry were kept. In some cases, they locked the victims inside a bathroom to give themselves more time to search the entire house. After leaving the scene, the group returned to the collection point, put their clothes back on, and then took another taxi to escape. All the stolen property, including cash, expensive watches, radio sets, and jewelry, was sold quickly and cheaply to illegal immigrant workers at construction sites. This was an effective strategy for cleaning stolen property, because the items quickly disappeared deep into temporary labor communities, making it difficult for police to trace them through traditional pawn shops. Over 30 months of activity, the gang spread fear through upscale residential areas. Among the most notable cases were 3 robberies at Tai Keng Avenue in 1974, Jalan Angklong in 1975, and Jalan Girang in 1975 at 3 a.m. on December 21, 1974. The gang broke into the home of an Indonesian businessman on Tai Keng Avenue. The scene showed that they had approached the house quietly, leaving no obvious signs of forced entry. Once inside, they woke the family members with knives. To make it safer for them to search the house, they forced everyone into a bathroom and locked the door from the outside. The total value of property taken in this robbery was 6,770 Singapore dollars, equivalent to about $3,000, including cash and jewelry. At Jalan Angklong, the gang carried out one of its biggest robberies. At around 4 a.m. on May 16, 1975, they broke into the home of 65-year-old Lu Pao Kung on Jalan Angklong, in the Upper Thomson area. Lu was asleep with his family of 5 when he was awakened by 4 men in swimming trunks standing around the bed. According to the victim's account, the intruders held knives to each person's throat and threatened them, saying, "Do not move. This is a robbery." The group spent up to 30 minutes searching the house and took property worth 17,280 Singapore dollars, equivalent to nearly $7,700. Less than a month later, the group struck again at the home of 52-year-old Lo E Lee, a teacher living on Jalan Girang. Following the same method, they broke in at 3 a.m. and left half an hour later with 1,920 Singapore dollars, equivalent to about $850 in cash and valuables. The repeated timing and method showed an excessive confidence in the protection of the spiritual powers Wasan had promised. The final robbery took place at the home of a businessman on Jalan Penchalak at around 4 a.m. on June 13, 1975. There, the gang took 9,370 Singapore dollars, equivalent to about $4,200. After leaving the scene, the group stopped about 1 kilometer away near Bidadari Cemetery to divide the loot. At 5 a.m., Police detectives patrolling along Upper Al Junaid Road spotted the group and gave chase. But by using the complex terrain of the cemetery and their ability to move quickly, all 4 members managed to escape into the darkness before dawn. The failure of traditional patrol measures to catch the swimming trunk gang placed heavy pressure on the Singapore police force. But their downfall did not come from a tactical mistake in the field. It came from a crack inside the group. Greed became the gang's greatest enemy. Suhaimi Harith, whose role had been to drive and provide support, began to feel that Wasan Sakibun was not dividing the proceeds fairly. To make up for it, Suhaimi secretly kept part of the stolen property, including watches, radio sets, and fountain pens, and began selling them on his own to co-workers at his workplace. On July 3, 1975, police received a crucial tip about a man selling suspicious items at an office on River Valley Road. Detectives raided the location and arrested Suhaimi at his workplace. At the time, Suhaimi still had a wristwatch, a gold ring, 5 and a ballpoint pen on him, all identified as items connected to recent robberies. Suhaimi was taken to the headquarters of the Criminal Investigation Department. There, under the pressure of continuous interrogation for 24 hours, he broke down and revealed the full identities and hiding places of his accomplices. Suhaimi was also identified by one of the victims during a police lineup. Immediately, a series of pre-dawn raids was launched. Wasan Sakibun, Wagaman Abdullah, and Khalil Muhammad Dole were arrested one by one at their homes or hiding places. Police recovered a large collection of break-in tools, along with more than 8,000 Singapore dollars in remaining property, equivalent to about $3,600. By late July 1975, the swimming trunk gang case had become a major legal focus, drawing strong public and media attention because of the bizarre nature and scale of the crimes. In court, all 4 defendants admitted to their crimes. According to press records, the gang was believed to have carried out around 500 break-ins, thefts, and robberies over more than 2 years of activity. Of those, police solved 222 cases. When the case went to trial, the 4 men faced a total of 228 charges of housebreaking, robbery, and theft, committed between January 5, 1973, and June 13, 1975. The total value of the cash and property taken was estimated at nearly 500,000 Singapore dollars, a record-breaking figure at the time. However, after the gang was arrested, police recovered only about 13,000 Singapore dollars, equivalent to nearly $5,800. This suggested that most of the stolen property had been disposed of very quickly, likely through unofficial trading channels, including illegal immigrant workers at construction sites. In their mitigation pleas, the defendants painted a picture of economic desperation, citing the rising cost of living as a trap that had pushed them into crime. Wasan Sakibun, who had once claimed to possess magic, now stood before the court as a 45-year-old man with 4 children to support. Wagaman Abdullah, a former secret society fighter, no longer appeared to have his usual intimidating presence. District Judge E.C. Fernandez, who presided over the case, handed down extremely severe sentences to reflect the seriousness of this record-breaking crime spree. The total punishment for the 4 men was 64 years in prison and 144 strokes of the cane. At the time, this was considered the highest sentence ever handed down by a district court in Singapore. The judgment was not only meant to punish the offenders, but also to send a strong warning against organized and reckless forms of crime. The rise and fall of the swimming trunk gang left a lasting mark on Singapore's social structure and security policies. Before the case, many Singaporeans still kept the habit of not locking their doors carefully or relying on fragile glass louvered windows. The boldness of the swimming trunk gang forced thousands of households to invest in stronger physical security measures, such as metal gates, multi-point locks, and nighttime lighting. Although the gang was arrested in 1975, its lingering impact partly pushed the Singapore government to think about a new model of community security. By 1981, the Neighborhood Watch Scheme was officially launched. The goal of the program was to turn every resident into the eyes and ears of the police, creating a community surveillance network to prevent similar break-ins. The legacy of the men in swimming trunks was the shift from passive security to active security, based on cooperation between the police and the public. This case provided a rich source of data for criminal psychologists on how a criminal group could use cultural elements, such as swimming trunks belief in spiritual protection to optimize its operations. It also highlighted the importance of controlling the market for stolen goods, a weak link that Singapore police focused on dismantling in the decades that followed. The swimming trunk gang was a distinctive criminal phenomenon, born from the intersection of extreme economic pressure and Singapore's rapid social transformation in the post-independence era. Their method of operation, minimizing clothing to maximize physical efficiency, became a clear example of how criminals could adapt to a tropical S5 environment and urban architecture. Yet their collapse once again showed that no matter how disciplined a criminal group may be, or how strongly it believes it is protected by spiritual powers, internal cracks caused by personal greed and the persistence of law enforcement can become fatal weaknesses. The sentence of 64 years in prison and 144 strokes of the cane did more than close the case against Wasan Wagaman, Suhi Hami and Khalil. It also marked the maturing of Singapore's security system. From these hard lessons, models of community security and residential vigilance were developed, helping shape Singapore into one of the countries with the lowest crime rates in the world today. The story of the swimming trunk gang remains a reminder of vigilance and of the importance of understanding the social forces behind even the strangest criminal behavior.